A long time ago, in the days after God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, a man named Lot lived with his two daughters in the mountains. Lot was the nephew of Abraham, a man chosen by God to become the father of many nations. After the cities were destroyed by fire from heaven, Lot and his daughters ran for safety. They were afraid to live in any town, so they stayed in a cave in the mountains. Lot's daughters thought there were no men left in the world. They believed they had to do something to keep their family alive. So they made a plan. They gave their father wine to drink. While he was drunk, the older daughter lay with him. The next night, the younger daughter did the same. Lot did not know what happened on either night. Later, both daughters became pregnant. The older daughter gave birth to a son named Moab. He became the father of the Moabite people. The younger daughter gave birth to Ben-Ami, who became the father of the Ammonites. These two groups of people would later live east of the Jordan River, in the land that is now Jordan. The Moabites settled in a land filled with hills and wide valleys. It was a place where sheep and goats could find grass. The people built cities like Ar, Kir, and Dibon. They learned how to grow crops and raise animals. They had their own kings and worshipped a god named Chemosh, who was not the true God of Israel. They made sacrifices to this god and even offered their own children in fire during times of trouble. Though Moab was born from a sinful act, the nation grew strong. The people lived near the Israelites, but they were not friends. Sometimes they traded with each other, but often they fought. When the Israelites left Egypt and traveled through the desert toward the land God promised them, they came near the land of Moab. The Moabite king at that time was Balak. He was afraid of the Israelites because they were many. So he sent messengers to a prophet named Balaam, asking him to curse the Israelites. Balak believed that if Balaam cursed them, they would lose in battle. But God spoke to Balaam and told him not to curse the Israelites. God said they were his chosen people and should be blessed. Balaam obeyed, and instead of a curse, he spoke blessings over Israel. This made Balak angry, but there was nothing he could do. Even though the Moabites were afraid of Israel, they later used a clever trick. They sent their women to invite Israelite men to their feasts. The men joined in eating and bowing to the Moabite god, Chemosh. God was angry and punished Israel for their sin. This early part of Moab's story shows how they began. Though they came from Lot's family, they chose a different path. They worshipped idols and became enemies to the people of God. Yet their story had just begun. In the next chapters, the Moabites would rise, fall, and fade into mystery. After the days of Lot and his daughters, the Moabites became a strong people. They lived east of the Dead Sea, in a land with rivers, mountains, and valleys. They built towns with strong walls. Their cities were full of farmers, shepherds, builders, and traders. Their land was rich in grain, fruits, and animals. Their capital was called Kir of Moab, and other towns like Ar, Heshbon, and Dibon became centers of life and trade. Though they came from Lot, the Moabites did not follow the God of Abraham. They worshipped Chemosh, a god made with hands. They believed Chemosh gave them victories in war. They built temples to him and offered gifts, sometimes even human lives. Chemosh became a symbol of Moabite pride, power, and faith. Over time, Moab's kings grew bold. They believed they were better than others. They did not remember how their father Moab was born from shame. They chose pride and forgot humility. Though they lived near the Israelites, they wanted to stay far from their God. After the Israelites settled in Canaan, they were ruled by judges. One of the early judges was named Ehud. During this time, the Moabites became powerful again. Their king was Eglon, a very fat and proud man. He gathered support from the Ammonites and Amalekites, and they attacked Israel. The Israelites were weak because they had sinned and turned away from God. Eglon defeated them and took control of the city of palms, Jericho. For 18 years, Israel served King Eglon of Moab. The Moabites took their goods, their harvest, and their peace. The people of Israel cried out to God, and God heard them. God raised a man named Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin. Ehud made a short sword and hid it under his clothes. He went to give tribute to King Eglon, pretending to be loyal. When he was alone with the king, Ehud said, "I have a message from God." As the king stood up, Ehud pulled out the sword and stabbed him. The sword went in so deep that the fat closed over it. Eglon died, and Ehud escaped. With the king dead, the Israelites rose up and fought. They defeated 10,000 Moabite soldiers and won their freedom. Moab was pushed back across the Jordan. Israel had peace for 80 years. This event showed how Moab, though powerful, could fall when God's hand moved. The Moabites had trusted in their army, their king, and their god Chemosh. But none of these could stand against the living God. Still, Moab remained. They returned to their land and rebuilt their cities. They waited and watched as Israel grew stronger. But the hatred between the two people stayed. Moab was a brother nation to Israel, but they chose the path of division. Though God had blessed their ancestor Lot for Abraham's sake, the Moabites chose to turn their backs on that blessing. They were a proud people, known for strength and stubbornness. But pride often leads to a fall, and in the generations ahead, the story of Moab would become even more complicated, especially with a woman named Ruth. A great famine came upon the land of Judah. There was little food and many people were suffering. A man named Elimelech from Bethlehem took his wife Naomi and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, to live in the land of Moab. Though Moab and Israel were not friends, Elimelech hoped to find food and a better life there. In Moab, Elimelech died, leaving Naomi with her two sons. The sons married Moabite women. Mahlon married a woman named Ruth, and Chilion married Orpah. For 10 years, they lived together as one family. But then both Mahlon and Chilion died. Naomi was left alone, with no husband and no sons. Her heart was broken. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem. She heard that the famine was over and that God had blessed his people with food again. She told Ruth and Orpah to stay in Moab and find new husbands among their people. At first, both women said they would go with her, but Naomi insisted. Orpah kissed her and went back home. But Ruth clung to Naomi and said something very special. "Do not ask me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Ruth was a Moabite woman, but her heart had changed. She no longer believed in Chemosh. She wanted to follow the God of Naomi. Her words were full of love and faith. Naomi saw her heart and let her come. When they arrived in Bethlehem, it was the season of the barley harvest. Ruth went to the fields to gather leftover grain to feed Naomi and herself. By God's plan, she came to the field of a man named Boaz. He was a kind and rich man, and he noticed Ruth's hard work and humble heart. He asked about her and found out she was the Moabite woman who had left her land to help Naomi. Boaz treated Ruth with kindness. He made sure she had food and safety. Naomi saw this and knew that Boaz was a close relative, someone who could help them as a family protector. In Israel, there was a law called the kinsman redeemer. This meant a close family member could marry a widow to keep the family name alive. Naomi told Ruth what to do. Ruth listened and followed. Boaz agreed to marry Ruth after settling matters with a closer relative. Soon they were married, and God blessed them with a son named Obed. Obed became the father of Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David, who would one day become the great king of Israel. This was a big moment in the story of the Moabites. Even though Moab had often stood against Israel, one Moabite woman found faith in the true God. She left her land, her people, and her gods behind. Because of her, the blood of Moab flowed in the line of Jesus Christ. Ruth's story showed that God can welcome anyone who believes, no matter where they come from. While the rest of Moab stayed in pride, one woman chose humility. Her name would never be forgotten. But the nation of Moab was not finished. In the next chapter, their pride would rise again and lead them into conflict with the prophets of God. As years passed, Israel grew into a strong kingdom under kings like David and Solomon. The Moabites, once stronger, were now under Israel's rule. King David defeated them and made them pay taxes. But even under control, the Moabites never gave up their pride. They waited for a time when they could rise again. After Solomon's death, the kingdom of Israel split into two: the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah. Moab saw the weakness and tried to break free. During the time of King Ahab of Israel, the Moabites were again under control. But when Ahab died, King Mesha of Moab stopped paying tribute. He wrote his story on a large stone called the Mesha Stele. In it, he claimed he defeated Israel and honored his god Chemosh by killing many people, even offering his own son in sacrifice. This act shocked many, but it showed the darkness in Moabite religion. The people believed that killing even their children could bring favor from their God. Their hearts were full of pride, but they did not know the true God. God sent prophets to speak his words, warning Moab. One of the strongest messages came from the prophet Isaiah. He spoke of Moab's fall. Because you have trusted in your own works and in Chemosh, disaster will come. Your cities will cry out, your people will weep, and your pride will be broken. Isaiah described how the towns of Ar, Kir, and Dibon would fall. The rivers would turn red with blood. The Moabite warriors would be weak like women in battle. Even their god Chemosh would be taken away with his priests and leaders. Another prophet, Jeremiah, also spoke against Moab. He said, Moab has been at ease from his youth. He has never been shaken. But now he will be poured out like wine and shattered like a broken jar. Jeremiah warned that Moab's joy would end. The proud nation that laughed at others would now be mocked. Their strongholds would fall, their people would flee, and their songs would turn to mourning. God would bring judgment for their pride, for their worship of false gods, and for laughing at his people. Yet even in judgment, God showed a small sign of mercy. Both Isaiah and Jeremiah ended their messages with hope. They said, in the last days I will restore the fortunes of Moab. This meant that after punishment, God would allow the land to rise again in a small way. Even though they were enemies, God had not forgotten that they were from Lot, Abraham's family. And he remembered Ruth, the Moabite woman who had chosen him. But the people of Moab did not listen. They trusted in their cities, their warriors, in their god Chemosh. They laughed at the words of the prophets, and soon their time would come. In the next chapter, we will see how Moab's pride led to war and how their name began to disappear from the earth. The Moabites had been warned. Prophets had spoken the word of the Lord clearly. Judgment was coming. But the people of Moab continued in pride. They trusted in their high walls, in their riches, and in their god Chemosh. They looked at Israel and Judah and thought, we are safe. No one can defeat us. They laughed at the warnings and went on living as they pleased. But God does not forget. The time came when powerful kingdoms began to rise in the world. The Assyrians came first, conquering many nations with their iron swords and strong armies. They took the northern kingdom of Israel into exile. Moab, seeing Israel's fall, rejoiced, but they did not see the danger that was also coming for them. Later came the Babylonians, led by King Nebuchadnezzar. They destroyed many cities, including Jerusalem. They burned the temple, took the people of Judah captive, and ruled over the lands. Now Moab was alone. No allies, no help, only their pride and idols. The Babylonians turned toward Moab and attacked city after city. The strong towns of Nebo, Heshbon, Dibon, and Kir were crushed. The rivers ran red with blood. People tried to flee, but there was no escape. Families cried out, but no one listened. The land that once laughed at others was now silent. The prophet Jeremiah described it like this: Moab is destroyed. Her little ones cry out. Her pride is broken. Her power is gone. Her people are scattered like dust in the wind. The Babylonian armies took many Moabites captive. They tore down their altars and broke the statues of Chemosh. The God who could not save them was carried away like an old piece of wood. Moab, the proud nation born from Lot's oldest daughter, was no longer a kingdom. It became a land of ruins and sorrow. Those who escaped lived in caves and deserts. They became like wanderers with no home. Others married into nearby tribes and disappeared. The name Moab was still spoken, but only in memory. The people were scattered and the kingdom was no more. In time, the Persians took over the land, then the Greeks and later the Romans. Each new empire erased a piece of Moab's story. New cities were built. New roads crossed the land. The old Moabite names faded. The language disappeared. The temples were never rebuilt. But some parts of their story lived on. In the scrolls of the prophets, in the stone of King Meshach's monument, and in the Bible through the story of Ruth, who chose God and became the great-grandmother of King David. Moab had once been a mighty people. They had land, kings, cities, and pride. But they turned away from God. They trusted in idols and mocked his truth. In the end, their pride brought their fall. Still, God had not forgotten. He had said that one day, a small part of Moab would be restored. Not as a kingdom, but as a memory and a warning. In the next chapter, we will see how, even after their fall, Moab's name lived on in mystery and silence, with traces hidden across the land. After the fall of Moab, their cities lay in ruins. Smoke no longer rose from their altars. Their warriors no longer marched. The once proud voices of the Moabites were silent. No king wore the crown of Kir-Hareseth. No mother named her son a prince of Dibon. The land became quiet. But Moab did not completely vanish. In the hills east of the Dead Sea, in rocky caves and hidden valleys, the memory of Moab still breathed, soft, low, and fading. Travelers spoke of strange carvings on stone walls. Nomads found clay pots buried under sand. Shepherds whispered stories about the people who worshipped Chemosh. The Moabites were no longer seen, but signs of their life were hidden like dust in the wind. Some of their writings were found on a large black stone, now called the Mesha Stele. This stone told the story of King Mesha, who fought against Israel and gave glory to Chemosh. It was written in a script much like Hebrew, proving that the Moabites had their own writing, their own way of telling their history. The stone was cracked, but the message remained. I am Mesha, king of Moab. His voice still echoed, even though his people were gone. Long after Babylon and Persia, when Jesus walked the earth, there was no nation called Moab. There were Romans, Greeks, Jews, and Samaritans, but no Moabites. Their temples were forgotten. Their gods were broken. Their blood had mixed with other nations. Yet Jesus knew their story. He came from the line of David, and David came from Obed, son of Ruth the Moabite. Though the Moabite kingdom had died, one Moabite woman had stepped into the light. Her faith, not her blood, had given her a place in God's plan. Even in the New Testament, the name Moab appears only in memory. Paul and the apostles did not write to Moab. The early church did not send missionaries there. By then, Moab was a memory, a story told around fires, a lesson written by prophets, a warning carved into stone. But the mystery remained. What happened to the rest of the Moabite people? Did some of them follow Ruth's example and turn to the God of Israel? Did they live quietly among other tribes, hiding their name? Or were they lost forever, their identity swallowed by time? Historians and archaeologists continue to dig in the ancient land once called Moab. They find ruins, bones, tools, and walls. But they have not found a people who still call themselves Moabites. It is as if the earth has covered their name with silence. Yet God had spoken through Jeremiah, saying, "But in the last days I will bring back the captives of Moab." What does this mean? Will a remnant of Moab rise again in some unknown future? Or was this fulfilled through Ruth, whose name was saved forever? We do not fully know. What we do know is that Moab's story teaches us something important. Even the proudest nation can fall. Even the most forgotten people can be remembered by God. Even the darkest past can lead to a future of hope, if there is faith. In the final chapter, we will reflect on what the story of the Moabites means for us today, and why their story, though lost, is not truly gone. The Moabites, once proud and strong, are now a people of the past. Their cities have crumbled, their language has disappeared, their god, Chemosh, is no more. Their history has become a mystery buried beneath stone and dust. But their story still speaks, because God let it be written down for us. The Bible does not hide the truth about Moab. From their beginning, born in shame between Lot and his daughter, to their rise as a kingdom, to their fall by Babylon's sword, the story is real and raw. The Moabites were not just a group of ancient people. They were human, like us. They had families, hopes, dreams, and fears. But they chose pride, false gods, and hatred over truth, humility, and faith. The Moabites teach us many lessons. First, where you come from does not define your future. Moab was born from a sinful act, but that did not stop Ruth, a Moabite, from becoming part of God's great plan. She chose faith over fear. She chose the God of Israel over the gods of her land. Because of that choice, her name is honored forever. Her story is remembered every time we read the story of Jesus. Second, pride leads to destruction. The Moabites had chances to change. They heard the words of Isaiah and Jeremiah. They saw what happened to other nations who turned against God. But they did not listen. They trusted in their walls and in Chemosh. They laughed at Israel's pain. And in time, their pride led them to ruin. Third, God is just. but he is also merciful. Even when he punished Moab, he gave a message of hope. In the last days I will restore the fortunes of Moab. This shows that God does not forget his promises. He may punish, but he also gives chances to return. Whether this promise was fulfilled through Ruth or will be fulfilled in the future, it tells us that God never closes his heart completely. Fourth, faith can rewrite a name. The name Moab was once a word of shame. People thought of idol worship, child sacrifice, and enemy armies. But after Ruth, the name also began to mean faith, loyalty, and love. She left everything behind to follow God. And because of her, the name Moab lives in the story of salvation. Lastly, no people are too lost to be remembered. The Moabites vanished, but they are not forgotten. Their story is still in the Bible.